held in Andover, Connecticut. We'll begin with a call to order and roll call if we could begin.
Yep. Karen Board Clerk. Pat Law, Superintendent, Region 8.
Tom Fremont, Hebron.
Carol Shea, Marlboro.
Rob Shadow, Hebron.
Sue Rapley, Marlboro.
Judy Benson Clark, Marlboro.
David Gustanian, Andover.
Danny Holtz Claw, Andover.
Caitlin Leahy, Marlboro.
Daniel Connor, Hebron.
Okay, next is the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is behind me. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next is public comments. Please state your name and the town that you're from. Are there any public comments? Yes.
Hi, Jen Rummy, Andover. I'm a teacher at the school, but I'm speaking here as a parent. I have a concern about one of the programs that is being changed at the school. I went to all the Inquiry Academy meetings before it was started and was told that the purpose of it was to provide education for those kids that don't seem to fit in with the traditional education. So I put my son on the team, and things seem to be going well. I just got an email from the Inquiry Academy stating that it is going up to the high school, which I was happy about, but only at the honors level. And not all kids can do that. So I'm concerned for my own children, all the other children on the Inquiry Academy that aren't at the honors level, that the program that was intended for them now is going to leave them behind. So I'd just like you to consider that and possibly offer it to the level 1, level 2 kids. So if they're not being successful in education, now it seems to be only for the kids that are being successful with the education. So that's it.
Public comments? Public comments? Okay. All right, with this superintendent's update, we first are going to hear about the contract, the SGH contract.
So the copy of the SGH contract I just got this evening from the lawyers. It is in the packet that I gave you right at the very beginning. I'll post it later on the website. You were asking me to bring it forward. It talks about the conditions of what SGH will be doing and the fact that they really are working in a supervisory role throughout the manufacturing and construction of the Windows project at RHAM this summer. Under the scope of services, it talks about the fact that they will visit the manufacturing facility, that they will do 8 site visits during the summer on campus, and then, a total of 10 site visits. The fees are on the second half of the page, as well as the key people that will be part of this process. We tentatively have a scheduled meeting with FCO and SGH to tour the campus this Wednesday, depending on weather, to be part of this process. So I'm looking to it, as you had asked me before, and given me the permission to sign off on a contract with SGH for this process. I just wanted to bring it forward to you so you could see that it's been finalized and it's ready to move forward. Thank you.
Next, we have the discussion and possible action regarding the 2017-18 academic calendar.
Yep, I gave you also a copy of this year's calendar in the packet when you came in. And if you take a look at the calendar, to date we have had 6 weather days. We had the 2 in October and then we've had snow days since then. The blue box on the calendar down at the bottom states that June 13th through the 21st are designated as makeup days for snow or other emergencies. If by February 28th, 7 snow days have been used, and additional makeup days will be taken from the April school recess beginning April 16th. I am bringing forward March to get through. My suggestion is that instead of, right now, as you can see on the calendar, the last day of school is the 180th day of school for students is June 20th. My suggestion is to take the February 21st PD Day, it's a Wednesday the 21st, move that to the end of the school year, for teachers would come in then at the end of the school year, make February 21st a day for students. Therefore, we would reach our 180th day on June 19th right now, leaving us still 2 legal days of possible snow that or other weather events that could happen. My concern with waiting until the end of February to see what happens is it does give us a lot of flexibility, and I'm trying to also avoid going into it taking April dates. Probably a lot of people have April vacations planned, and I'm concerned about just between teachers and students having possible plans not being there. It just looks like a way that we might be able to hopefully avoid that as a situation.
Did you speak with the teachers union today? Is that their preference?
I spoke with Ethan today. I've spoken with the director of curriculum. I have spoken with all of the building principals, and everybody's in agreement that that makes sense and would work fine.
Would students, you know, when we can ask other questions, go around that. Some students I know definitely have plans. Would they be counted differently? I think there was a way that they were excused or something. If
I can certainly work with the administration. I'm sure they'd be able to work around that, considering that right now it would be considered a day off for students, and then we'd be actually holding school that day.
Okay. So do you want us to make a motion then on this and have a discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So is there a motion for this calendar?
So moved.
Second. Okay, second. So discussion?
What was the date that you were going to that?
So we would be taking the February 21st Professional Development Day and moving it to the end of the calendar, which would then make the 20th the it would make the 19th the 180th day for students, and the 20th would be a PD day for teachers. And it still allows us the flexibility, should we have another snow day or two, we still have a March PD day and we still have another snow day in there, so it does allow us some flexibility.
Sense.
Does the March piece make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's proactive. We're being proactive.
Yeah?
I think that's wise. We can do it now without an issue.
I also did speak with the superintendents of the other 3 towns, and they thought it was a great idea as well, although they don't all have the 21st as PD day. So.
That's actually potentially helpful, because if they already were running school that day, people with siblings. Mrs. Rappel?
So if we used up the 21st, then we would have no choice than to go to April.
So, well, the board can make decisions around what they want to do. You would have to, again, make a motion on the calendar that, because you're changing what is the process that is part of the calendar right now. But I think at this point, it at least allows us to get through hopefully the month of February with some options, and we would have to take a look at what happens in March. But I think you do have options moving forward.
So what are the options moving forward?
So moving forward, if you need to, we do have a March PD day. We could move that also to the end of the school year, adding in a day there for students. And the board does have the ability to be able to extend the end of the school year through the end of June and not touch April vacation. It would be something you would have to decide on as a board, if you actually need to get to that point.
The March PD day.
March 9th.
Yeah, may I just ask why you're not looking at March 9th rather than the 21st, which is closer? And as I said, I do know for sure that people have plans.
So the reason I'm looking at doing the February one is because I'm looking to keep my options as open as I can.
Okay, in case there are multiple.
In case there are multiple ones. So I'm looking to do that now so that it gives people fair warning about all
Right,
that,
right.
and if they do have flexible plans.
And I'm sorry, Mrs. Rappel.
So you're saying fair warning, but it's 2 weeks away.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so, and I know we're talking about options now, but that seems like, if people have plans, they have plans. And on the calendar, it clearly states that we would eat into April vacation. So everyone knows that, and I'm sure people with plans in April are counting down the days. But for February, this is, 2 weeks away. So that's why I asked about what are our other options, because in my opinion, I would rather do the staff days and leave the February vacation alone. But, I'll go with what the board wants, but 2 weeks away for families that do have plans is not a lot of time to change the plans.
And that's certainly things we would need to consider in the process. One way or another, the board would have to make a decision because of the blue box that states on here by the end of February if you do 7 days. And as of right now, Wednesday is a question mark in my head, which would be your 7th day.
Right.
It's just something that I'm looking to consider to put out there for you to think about.
Mrs. Rapoli, which PD days are you talking about? March 9th and is March 30th?
No, that's
No.
30, that's.
February
That's
21st
a
and March
good
9th
Friday.
are the PD days.
So what do you?
I would, the 9th, I wanted to know what our other options were.
Okay.
So that I'm clear now on what our other options are and what is going to happen
Okay.
and what we have the ability to do.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying opposed or raising your hand. Okay, all those who abstain signify by raising your hand. Okay. Then we have other, and I do, because news is happening quickly in the state and things are happening, so I would just like for the board, an update on, as we sit here today, what you believe our current deficit is.
I believe right now, based on the last projection that you had, it was about $321,000.
Okay. And there were communications that it was maybe less. Is that?
I think that's somebody's perception of how they are doing accounting and different things, and I would not hold to a number with that yet at this point. I think that I would wait to actually see that the monies come from the state.
Just so we are all clear, could you share that a little more? So for us to be at 80-something thousand, does that mean we get state money? Is that, or?
I'm not clear on your question, and I'm looking for a
How did they
document.
get to that 80? I think
Yeah.
I'm looking for an explanation.
Yeah.
How-
To get to 80?
How that other person came up with that figure of 80.
Well, who is the other person?
I don't honestly know, and I can't speak for that person, nor
Okay.
would I try to speak for that person because I'm not understanding what they put
Okay.
in their
Okay,
correspondence.
fair enough.
There's someone within the administration.
No,
Oh.
Did I miss an email?
I have no idea who this email has gone to or not.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so how about, okay, then my next question, just because as I said, and this is just for clarification, so everybody hears the same thing, could you, I know a lot has come out with ECS. Can you share your understanding of where we are now with ECS?
Well, I know there was a memo that came out recently around what are the holdbacks, if the holdbacks are going to be considered holdbacks, that they cannot affect your MBR, that they can't be counted against it, only the original amount that the loss was for each of the towns can be counted as far as any action they might take with their budget. There is still a deficit that the state obviously is running right now, and they're still looking at options around ECS, and I don't know if they've made any
Okay.
specific decisions, but they are looking at, and what the governor is putting forward, my understanding is that he's looking at recalculating the ECS formula that was part of the original budget that passed, moving forward. So we'll have to wait and see what actually comes through
Okay.
that process.
Okay, and I think just to say, it's certainly for everybody been a difficult budget year with numbers moving consistently, and I know at least a couple of us are going to go. Anybody else, that would be great, to the legislative breakfast this Thursday, you know, just to try to hear more, because there is a lot of, there are a lot of emails, and some of it actually that I've seen has come from EastCon and things, and I'm just not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, so I'm just asking, which is one of the things that I'm going to, if I can transition, to ask for everybody who presents tonight. Sometimes we don't know things. Don't assume we do. Please be ridiculously clear. One of my favorite movies, Philadelphia, says, "Tell it to me like I'm a 4-year-old." We will not be insulted, because we don't know what you do every day in the ins and outs. So if you can be just very clear, we'd greatly, greatly appreciate that. And you know, I know it was a public comment, but we heard something about a program. I mean, it's just important. We understand, I think, that it's a very difficult budget. This is undoubtedly a difficult budget, but we just really, I think, want to make sure that we understand things the best we can, because it sounds like everybody in the state is still confused, or not confused. There hasn't been clarity on what the money will be to towns. So, so please make sure that we're as informed as possible. And, you know, Dr. Law was kind enough to do that back in, I think maybe that was the November meeting. And I know there were a lot of compliments after that, that it was clear to the public and that level of clarity. So that would be greatly appreciated.
Judy, just a point of information.
Yes.
The EastCon information, what are they sending you? Because I know we don't get electronic or email.
No, I
get
EastCon information, and I read it very quickly, so I may have misunderstood it.
Because I don't get it. That's what I'm saying.
I know, because I am the liaison piece to
Okay, that's
EastCon.
right. Yep.
And you know, actually, I was thinking about that today. I get a very lot of information from them. I'd be happy to send it all. Actually, the email that I sent to the board today about ECS was from EastCon, but I emailed him back and asked if I could share it because it says confidential in it. And he said absolutely to share it. So I did share that with everybody. So, you know, that could be at another point. We could even talk you'll get a ton of email if you get on that list, but you might want it. So I'd be comfortable if it's okay with EastCon, which, you know, forwarding that. And I read it quickly, and, you know, I feel like this has been a complicated budget season, so it was certainly not to confuse things or embarrass anybody or anything. It was for my own understanding. And I think everyone's, as we're going forward, was the question. So, okay, so I think we are on a department coordinator program presentations.
No, I'm not a department coordinator, but I set this up.
Okay, great.
So I'm thrilled that we have half of our department coordinators here for this meeting, and the other half will be at our next meeting. There are some additional handouts if anybody would like them from the department coordinators. And we have put their names and their departments on the slide so that you know who they are, but I'm sure they're going to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them. Sure. And I think it should lighten up some, but is that good? That's fine.
Good evening, my name is Beverly Fisher. I'm chair for our music classes, departments. The fine arts department at RHAM is an exceptionally strong department or program. And if you have been to any concerts from the Golden Gallery, you've seen firsthand the level of work that's being produced there. I'm going to start by going through the art highlights and then the music highlights, and then I'll talk about our objectives as far as what we're going to do with the funding for that. So both music and art programs receive a lot of recognition. The art departments have work selected for the Emerging Artist exhibit at Dartmouth College this year. Ashley Young, one of our seniors, was one of 66 students selected on 493 students across the New region who submitted work. Lexi Gosling received Connecticut Women Artists High School Portfolio Award this year through Scholastics. We have several high school students who received regional recognition through the Scholastic Art Program, and for the 4th year in a row, we've received national recognition from the Scholastic Program as well. RHAM Art students have won the Congressional Art Competition for the 2nd year, 2 years, past 2 years in a row. The students are flown down to DC with family members to see their work on in the Capitol, and their work stays in the Capitol building for a full year. Last year, 5 of the students who went on into the fine arts received over $20,000 in scholarships based on their portfolios and the level of work that was in them. We've also had students take the Manchester Scholarship for the past 2 years. We have around 5 to 7 students in art and music who go on to pursue degrees in art. We have an AP program, honors program at the high school. Started the program about 5 years ago, and we've seen increased enrollment in that class every year for the program, and also we've seen an increase in students who are not going on in the arts, taking advantage of the opportunity to receive AP credit. We also, as a department, produced a little RHAM board in conjunction with the English classes that goes up to 300 parents and community members, all faculty and all students. And they also published a monthly magazine, which distributes streaming copies throughout the school. We have, if you've ever been to our Evening of the Arts event, and if you haven't, you will consider coming. All students who take our classes will have work in the exhibit, which is the end of the year. I'll talk a bit about that again. So, music items. So, we've had 12 in the last 2 years. Musicians receive statewide recognition from the Connecticut Music Association. And we have 34 students this year, high school and middle school, recognized through their regional ensembles. We have 1 student who's progressed onto the nationals for music education, NAE, National Association of Music Education. It is very rare for students to progress onto that national level. We have first place recipients in many regional adjudication festivals, including the Wyndham Council. And just like music and art, there's about 5 to 7 of our students who go on to degrees in music. The music technology program has seen a boom with the introduction of the students teaching classes there, and the enrollment is up 250% in those classes. And I think some of that also speaks to having teachers move between middle and high school. We've seen an increase in both the music technology and the choral program because we have teachers who teach at the middle school and at high school, and creates continuity in the programs as well as for the students. A new class this year, which has been proposed, is a history of popular music. We're trying to offer classes that students who have not been in band for the past 4 years can take the music credit. So we're trying, if you haven't been in chorus, you don't like to start a chorus, if you haven't been in band, you don't like to start your band. So to offer more opportunities for all of our students to be involved in music. So the funds that we're requesting this year for both programs are going to be the same. We're both very material heavy and we're both very equipment heavy. So containing, preparing, and replacing large amount of equipment between the 2 programs. With our program, since I've been in charge, we've gone into a cycle of when things need to be renewed and replaced, working with kilns, tracking when firings are happening so that we know when they're going to need to be recoiled, so that we can start to plan for those larger expenditures. The 2 ceramic kilns have been recently recoiled, and we actually ended up having a glass kiln recoiled this year. But in music as well, we also have a large amount of repairs to get done every year. When things can't get repaired, then they have to be replaced, and we've been trying to pay attention to the repair cycles for the past 3 years, so we can anticipate when things are going to need to be repaired. We also, in RHAM Music, offer a lot of technology classes. It's important for those students to be able to have access to industry standard equipment. All of the labs have been replaced in the past 3 years. This year we had some software requests as well to address that maintaining of the industry standard for students. So when we're thinking about our classes, we have 2 ways that we're really thinking about it. How we address all of the students at RHAM, and we want them to have a wide range of classes that they can take. But we also have to think about those 5 to 7 students who are going to go on and going to their career. So our classes are arranged such that there's a large range of things that students can take, but then they can progress forward into more advanced levels of those classes. We want to, in both of our programs, to make sure that we are providing a rigorous and full enough program that the music program at RHAM is better than the magnet schools. And for RHAM Music, the program we have is far better than any of the magnet schools. And I hope that when we have our teachers also down at the school, we can help to stop that stem of students going to the magnet schools for RHAM Music. I have some pictures for you. There we go. So, we have our 2 big events coming up in the next few months, one of which is our Empty Bowls event. In both RHAM Music, we've established honor societies this year, so we'll have more students involved with the production of both of these events. Both of them pull large amounts of community members into the building. For Empty Bowls, we have 500 bowls this year, so we're hoping to pull in, you can make some. We're hoping to pull in 500 community members into the building to share in that night with us. And for the Evening of the Arts, we do sit-down dinner for 250 people. And there are hundreds of people that come beyond that. So if you've never been to either of these events, they really are the shining stars at RHAM. So please come and see RHAM shine. Do you have any questions for me on highlights, objectives, or the magic numbers?
Why don't we go around and begin with Mr. Greenwood? Okay, Mrs. Shea.
I just wanted to get a little clarification on, you have 5 to 7 in art that pursue, and then you also have 5 to 7
in music.
in
Yes.
music, so there's a total of 10 to 14
Yes.
to pursue
Yes.
higher education in the arts. Okay, thank you. And you say, you said that your programs are far better than the magnet schools. Could you just kind of cite one example for
They don't
us?
have AP, but the magnet school. They don't have the,
They don't have it.
they don't have an
That's
AP
impressive.
program, they don't have access to state-of-the-art equipment. We have 2 Mac labs for art and one for music. And our access to physical materials and supplies is far better. We often have students who come back senior year to take AP at RHAM. So they're coming back from magnet schools. But hopefully we can start to engage them more at the middle school level and stop them ever going there.
That's good to know, thank you.
Just to quickly, I love the Rambler.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I love that publication. The kids do a great job with that. You talked about magnet schools again. Do you know how many kids are leaving to go to magnet schools?
I don't
for
know the
art
actual
music?
numbers. I know that every year we have at least 1 or 2 that come back.
Okay. And what is music tech?
Music Tech, we have Eric Nunes is our music technology teachers, and he teaches 3 different technology classes. So they're learning in the Mac lab. They all have keyboards. One is they do scoring for film. So they're learning the technology programs to work with music rather than playing an instrument.
Thank you.
Questions?
So that's a great statement that we want our art and music better than the magnet schools, and it sounds, the visuals are lovely. It sounds like you're doing a lot of work that's allowing that to happen. And you spoke about the middle school. Does the budget that you have allow you to do the work you need to do to have this a realistic, whatever that means, but you know, the state-of-the-art program for the high school and middle school?
The middle school, I would say that the funding has been sufficient for the three, I think, for 3 years now, and that's been fairly constant. We really haven't had any problems with the middle school funding at all. We've struggled a little bit more with the high school funding and with some of the budget cuts, just because we have more equipment, we have more supplies that we need up at the high school. With the budget freezes over the past few years, we've, as a department, started to fundraise. We fundraise around $2,000 additional money every year to support our program. So
Is that adequate with the $2,000 fundraising?
It helps. It helps. I don't feel like our students want for tremendous amounts.
Yeah.
We certainly, if like we just had a student who did a very elaborate casting project, and she needed to go out and buy a lot of that equipment, materials herself, because there just wasn't the money in the budget for a single student doing a large casting project. So unless something large like that comes up, for the main part, we're able to make it work.
Okay, and you know, as I said, I don't know, so forgive me if this is not a great question, but does that 2,000 in fundraisers, is that involve music boosters? Is
No,
music
this
boosters
is
separate?
just art teachers, and we make T-shirts.
Oh, wow. Okay, so music boosters.
It's not, music boosters is completely separate.
Okay.
You represent both.
I do represent both, but don't ask me to sing. It's not going to end well.
I think one of the things I had an opportunity to briefly speak with one of the board members today, and they reminded me, they said, don't forget there's music boosters and some other things. And it would be interesting to me, and that may be more for Dr. Law, there seems like there's a lot of supplementation in this community, which is amazing, but just so that not only the board knows, but the community knows, because I feel like that would have people support the budget better when they know that, you know, many departments have fundraisers or different pieces. And, you know, perhaps that is out there, that information that's known, but I'm not sure that it's together in a clear way that people can see exactly how much is supported by, I mean, because I know that there are sports fundraisers, music boosters. I mean, I'm sure there are many things, as I'm saying.
Music boosters, it doesn't support their program. It supports things like when they go on a Disney trip. They're raising money for those big expenses. There's not very often that it comes back as a budgetary expense.
Right. But they also support scholarships.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, I had some questions about specifically some of the music things. I was a former member of the music boosters, and I know that they've had some difficulty getting replacements for some of their musical instruments. In fact, it had been in previous budgets a couple times, and I know that was cut.
We have the lease purchase that was cut last year somehow magically is still in there. I don't know if Bob did that, but the lease purchase that we had done for 5 years was renewed, and we were able to purchase for another 5 years.
Yeah, I think it had been cut a couple budget seasons.
That's right.
Pat, I was scanning through your proposal. Were there any significant cuts to the music and arts program?
No, and I have to say I really appreciate that Dr. Law just struck through so that you can see what was taken out, because that had not been how it happened in the past.
I thought the MP Bowls project was really neat. It was, just for people who don't know, it was offered to everybody in the 3 towns, and people could come in and help make bowls. We had a group of seniors from Andover that came, brought a bus up a couple times. My wife and I did it. A lot of people got involved in it. it was really neat. We didn't get to paint. I don't think they wanted us painting them, but
The seniors have been, every year they come to the Empty Goals event, or when we have an event year, they come to the event. When we have a making year, they come to the making. They are always invited to Evening of the Arts, and they come, we set aside a large table for them. It's a really nice way for us to really engage with the community. And really, over the past few years, we've really tried to make that a big part of our role. The choirs all go out and sing Christmas carols at all of the senior centers at Christmas. So we've tried to really make art and music a part of the community, not just a part of the school.
Yeah, it really was. We went to the Empty Bowls at the school when it was done 2 years ago. And we're really looking forward to going this year. This was a fun project. So I think they add a lot. I know that the music boosters fundraising was curtailed a lot because they're no longer doing the milkshake booth at the Hebron Fair. From a logistics standpoint, it was scheduling hundreds of kids during the 4 days there, and it was just very, very difficult.
Yeah. The fundraising it's a lot of extra work for the teachers, but it's something we don't recognize that we need to do to support our programs, or the programs that we want to be able to offer our students.
Okay, but could you just, for those of us who don't know the exact things that it does, what does Music Boosters cover?
Like we said before, it covers every year. They do a scholarship for I think 2 students that are going on to music for their college education. It does things like it defrays costs when kids go to competitions, people who can't afford it. There's that scholarship, and there's also funding from the school that helps out for kids who can't afford to go to trips.
Every year they do a trip to Disney.
Yes, every couple of years they do that, yeah.
So,
it doesn't pay for the trip, it just defrays it a little bit.
Thank you.
Just an observation, and thank you for your presentation, to kind of the Rambler and the Little Rambler. It's just an extraordinary document, or piece of work, or art, or newsletter, correspondence, whatever you want to call it. It's just absolutely, to see it evolve over the last
the transformation from the newspaper to the weekly newsletter and the monthly magazine has been really
it's really top notch, and that's off to the students and the faculty and staff that are involved in that, because it's just really good. So,
I'll pass that on.
Just the observation that, remembering that music and arts are also homerooms for the people who might not be doing athletics. It's very important to have that sense of community, but many people, my daughter's in band, for example, and that's her place in that school. It anchors her, and it helps her focus on the rest of what she's doing while she's there.
We were looking at some statistics today, the valedictorians and salutatorians for the past 8 years, and for 6 out of those 8 years, they were either both or just one of them was involved in arts and music. So, any other questions?
Students.
They live it every day.
Okay. The next subject we will cover is English. There is currently no English boosters, so if anybody's interested in starting that, we would love it. And maybe we should start selling poetry in the hallway, I'm thinking. I'm always trying to think of ways to get revenue, so we haven't come up with anything in the department, but maybe Ron's great novelist. So just to give a little context for people that are new to the board, if we go back 2 budget seasons, the English budget was approved at $11,080. And that year, we spent $9,473. Before I even came into this room last year, I had a proposed budget of around that same 9,000 number. It was cut to 5,792. So the budget that we're working under this year is significantly lower, about $5,200 lower than what we had in our proposed budget and accepted budget for the previous year. This year, we're looking at $173 less for next year than what we have this year.
Which year?
So this year we're working with a significantly lower, almost
right,
average. year, we had, now this year, what's coming up, what's being proposed, we're going a little bit less, as we were able to move some line items.
So
we
was it from,
So what hap-
16, 17?
16, 17, we had an approved budget of over 11,000.
Yeah, okay.
17, 18, we had a budget approved of 5792. And we worked within the constraints, understanding that this is a mess. I mean, the state situation is a mess. I was at the Board of Finance meeting for Hebron in December, and just the not knowing is crazy. And it would be nice for us not to feel like we're dependent upon that. So I can certainly appreciate, as a taxpayer also in Hebron, that we're keeping our belts tight. But just to give you a perspective of the changes that we've had to make in terms of our thinking about what we can do in the department, and the kinds of things that we have available to do with the budget constraints that we have. We are talking also about 0.00019% of the whole budget. So that's sort of that number. We're not talking about big money. So if we take a look at the highlights for the department, and I appreciate the chance to share the highlights because it allows people to see that they're getting quite a bit for their input in terms of supporting RHAM's education. So our English department has highly engaged, skilled and professional teachers. Everyone in my department is engaged in this climate. We're very committed to developing ourselves as professionals, and primarily committed to student learning. I am incredibly proud to lead this department. Every single person in this department is a consummate professional who cares so deeply for the students and who goes always the extra mile to make sure that students are learning in the way that they need to learn. Our students, we know, looking at the SATs, we're the top 10% for ELA scores in the state. I know we're higher than that, but all the math is top 10. We're 11th ranked, but we do well not because we're teaching to a test, but because we're teaching our students how to think about the things that they read and write about. Students in the middle and high school have published writing, many recognized through local, state, and national writing contests. Lots of scholastic awards, whether they're silver or honorable mention, gold. We had, in the bottom right corner, we had 3 students from RHAM chosen for the School for Ethical Education Laws for Life contest last year. I think there's about 10 kids in that picture. There were, I think, 15 state winners. 10 state winners.
3 of them. It was significant. And by the way, that's the ocean, and it was beautiful, and there was steak and shrimp. It was a beautiful, this was really something special. Also, next to that, you see a middle school young man from the title writing class who Karen Dwyer encouraged to submit a piece of his writing and who won an award for that. So, and I didn't put how many, because there's so many kids that have won awards. Some of that writing happens in class as part of our curriculum because the skills that particular contest is looking for aligns with what we're hoping to teach them. But there's also things that happen outside where a teacher will share with students a contest that's available and then support them in the work that they're doing to send a piece of writing off for publication. In addition to that, we certainly have the writing that's happening with the RHAM Board magazine. A potential of 550 college credits can be awarded this year to the RHAM juniors and seniors through classes taken in the English department. That doesn't count for UConn, that gives 4 credits for the APs. That only counts if you count as 3. So Manchester Community College English 101, Manchester Community College Communications 173, AP Lit, and AP Language. Those 4 classes, with what we have enrolled this year, will award up 550 credits if the students meet the standards. That's a lot. And if you do the math per credit, even at the least expensive university, there's a lot of money that's being saved by parents. Students are constantly and consistently challenged. They're engaged in active learning. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you have a student. That student is presenting to his classes, the hallway, where they've laid out their, I believe it was their 6-word memoirs. We have students, if you look at almost any of our English classes at any time, students are active participants in their learning, and research tells us that this is the best way for students to learn. Department has a commitment to building a culture of reading, incredibly important that students take that love for reading beyond
just the classroom and what's expected of them. In doing so, we revamped our summer reading program, and we are continuing to work on ways to help students to use reading as inquiry and curiosity building activities for them. So we got everything there. So budget objectives. Big requests. So there's things that we hope to be able to continue to do. And some of those, some of that funding will come through our budget, and some of that funding will come through the overall budget. So one thing is to strengthen the systems for placement and data collection in our intervention classes. This year we've done some sort of examining what our intervention classes look like, and whether it means release time for teachers to do some norming with benchmarks, or it means purchasing or a license for a particular program to help test students. And we don't have anything right now that we're requesting for next year in that way. It would be nice if maybe we had some release time for benchmark norms, but overall, this is something that we're looking into, but we realize it's important for us to start really getting a system for collecting data in this way. Growing our partnership with special education, we have wonderful co-taught classes with terrific collaborations, and there's been professional development about co-teaching. We'd like to see our teachers be able to go and have the teacher, classroom content teacher, and the special ed co-teacher be able to attend some professional development, not necessarily about co-teaching, but about the subject that they're working in, so that they can bring that back to the classroom. We'd like to provide opportunities for students to engage in authentic writing activities. We were talking about the Rambler. We've been able to expand that class, the class that has that as one of their projects, and rename the class to Publication, Writing and Design course. And we're hoping that we can continue to have the students engage in those kinds of activities. Learning about writing, we've actually expanded to include projects like yearbook and different kinds of writing that will allow students to expand their understanding of the different ways that you write for public publication. We're hoping to also put some things in the local magazines. We'd also like to continue to maximize Writing Lab as a resource. That's a paid duty. We have increased student participation in coming to Writing Lab. They are really starting to see the value of it. Some days there's 8 kids in there at one time. They send some kids out because you can't work with 8 kids at once, one-on-one in a 45-minute period. But it's been wonderful. We've also, if there's a period when a teacher needs help in a class, those Writing Lab staff have been able to go into and push into the classroom and support writing instruction that way. So it's been a change that we made this year, but we want to continue to grow that program. We'd like to provide students a chance to engage in ELA-related activities beyond the classroom, and you'll see in my hope-tos, both in the classroom and outside, in the school and outside of the school. So if it means that we are able to bring somebody in, or have students be able to engage in something off-site as well. And build on ways technology can enhance and support student learning. We've had just an explosion of opportunity to use technology in the classroom with the one-to-one. We've had incredible instructional support. I'm not sure what's going to happen next year because I believe Jerry Deneen might not be with us, and she's been just amazing. She really launched us into the 21st century in terms of technology and how we can use it in the classroom. So I don't know what the plan is to create that support or to maintain that support, but I'm hoping we have it because it has absolutely impacted instruction in our classes. We've been able to do things that have been able to hand over learning to the students in a very significant way, and they're going to be graduating into a world where they need to own their learning. And what Jerry's done in terms of empowering us as teachers has been really significant. So I'm hoping whatever the plan is, we have that same level of support. In terms of very specific aspects of our budget, we're hoping to be able to introduce some new literature and nonfiction texts. There are very few things in my budget that fall into this, only because of the financial constraints. It's just what it is. We have, to be honest, been collecting books at Marlboro Library, Hebrew Library, Goodwill, Salvation Army, and whenever we see something that is from our book room, we'll grab it for $1, 50 cents, $2.
Again, because we are really operating in this construct of there might not be any money to do things, and we understand it, because this is the reality we're living in. But we have a class for contemporary literature that we created a couple years ago from 3 other classes, so we sort of condensed them down. We've been using it as much as we can from our book room, but it's a contemporary literature class, so we'd like to make sure we have contemporary literature in the class. We also have students that are going on to different kind of vocational aspirations, and we'd like to make sure that we're meeting them in their place of interest when it comes to reading. We need to replace copies of key texts that are falling apart. In a board meeting last year, somebody was talking about, it's kind of embarrassing, a text that was in 3 pieces, and we tape things up, but for things that are falling apart, we'd like to make sure that we can replace those. Securing classroom supplies that support an active and dynamic classroom, whether it's construction paper. I think you saw in the picture on the previous slide, the students will create something, put it up, and then use that as a form of instruction for their class, guided by their teacher, so those kinds of things. And also, we'd like to be able to bring visiting artists in to enhance students' understanding and engagement with the way that English language arts happen in the real world. This year, we were able to unencumber a little bit of money and bring in a poet to support the students that participated in the Poetry Out Loud program. And I believe we had 63 or 65 students at RHAM participate in the school-wide program, and we're able to bring in a published poet for a song. She knew somebody, so she helped us out. But to be able to do that, I last year had $1,500 in the budget, hoping to bring in a Shakespeare troupe this year. Because of the budget freeze, we did not use that money, but we were able to uncumber that little bit for the poets. So, yeah, sure.
One minute, I really apologize.
No, it's okay.
Where do we find this? Is this, I can't find it in here, ask Dave for help. Is this?
What are you looking for?
Like what,
Her specific, every department's specific line item things are not in there. They're within the budget book in each of the larger line items. So her textbooks are under the textbook one. They're not, every single line item from every single department is not in the budget book. They're within the whole budget concept in the back.
It's just, we're really
Yeah, it's in a
trying
different,
to pay attention. I apologize for
There's 0 in
talking.
textbooks, so don't worry.
No, but
There's 0.
we're trying to figure out, because we said.
You wanna
that's
look
a
at the
small-
numbers, right,
Right, and
yeah.
that's really a very small number, 5,000 something is very small, so we want to try to understand the
Sure.
impact and see that actually it's okay. If it's not there, we can't, that's okay.
The one thing I want to share, and anybody who's ever done a budget and tried to project what your need is going to be, it is so hard for me to say exactly what we'll need. So for example, if I put in X amount of copies for something with this way comes, I think I put in like 46, we're probably going to have, if we have 50 over the 2 classes, that means I got to somehow find 4 copies of the book with some money somewhere. If, for example, this year, I've taught the English 101 class. I've never had more than 2 sections. This year I have 3 sections. There's a version and translation of Antigone that I've used for years. We've bought 499 copies, so we have 44 copies. I have 60 students. So I have to think, okay, how am I going to, okay, I have another translation. It's not as good. It's harder to access. Which class has to deal with that? So, if there were money that was available, I'd say, okay, I can go and grab these. They're not like $4.99 a piece, but you have to dig around for them on Amazon used. But still, that's nothing I could have anticipated last year because I didn't know how many students I would have this year. So fortunately, there's been a flexibility and understanding of that, since I started doing this. But that's a reality also of what we're dealing with when we try to come up with a budget and then say, oh no, there's 4 sections of this class instead of 3. What are we going to do now? Should we not do the book? Should we do the book? How should we make it work? In the middle school, we've sort of gotten around it by instead of ordering enough for every student to have a copy to bring home and read at home as homework, we just get a class set and they have to do some of that reading in class. It's not optimal. For what we can do on Kindles, we have, but when you're digging into research, and I talked about this a couple of years ago, that's also not optimal. So, it's difficult. We do understand the challenges of this this budget, and that's why we're willing to go and, buy things with our own money. But it would be great if we won the lottery and we could not have to worry about this, but this is the reality, so. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we'll go around. I'm just going to go around sequentially again and ask questions. Mr. Tremont.
No.
Yeah, I have a question. Over the last 3 years or so, when we phased in the one-to-one, I guess it's completely phased in now.
Yes, it is.
And have you had an opportunity to evaluate the impact of that on your budget as far as whether it, there's the cost of the software, of course, or whatever.
Right.
I would assume that you would have to include, and the hardware's provided.
Right.
So, are there any other impacts it's had, plus or minus? I would hope minus on some aspects. Although I have to tell you, I think your budget was incredibly low.
Yeah.
Incredibly low. But I'm just curious about,
How that's
working.
impacted.
Yeah.
I would say, Carol, the main way that's the one-to-one has impacted us. I don't know how much, for example, the databases cost. That would be in Jerry's budget. But I do know that in terms of instruction, it has been incredible. It has allowed students to take ownership of so many different parts of their learning where we're able to guide them to and really empower them. In terms of utilizing it for, say, a text, it's been great for research. Like I said, Jerry's been great about getting the databases on. Now we have the passwords up on the website and just great links to get in there, so it's so much more accessible. We've also learned about different, for example, I was mentioning nonfiction text. We've been able to access Newsela or Newsela, depending on how you pronounce it. So there's subscriptions to those that come through the media center. So a lot of that's come, and so that sort of working in conjunction with Jerry has been terrific because we've been able to. She's really supported our instruction in that way, especially since it's so much to do with information and we're dealing with that. We've been able to access things open source. So for example, in something short, a short piece that I can say, okay, I want you to do this nonfiction piece, here's the link. Where I'm not making photocopies of it or whatnot. Well, kids will often print it out because again, I might say I want something annotated, in which case I'll give them a copy of it, a paper copy, but they can't annotate a book. So we've used it as much as we can in terms of money saving, but I would say the primary benefit of having the one-to-one has been the amount of instruction that where we can incorporate meaningful technology to make the instruction more active for the student, to engage them. For example, even I had my students, they were working on a paper. I gave them a model paragraph and I went over it in class and it was annotated and they were still struggling and they're handing in sample paragraphs. I'm like, why aren't they getting this? So Jerry taught us how to do Screencastify last year. And I went, which is where you actually record yourself. So you're working on the screen, but the kids can see what you're typing, but they can also hear your voice. So I did this recording, and I had gone with 5 members of my department to a workshop, which was free, on flipped classroom and station rotation. So when I came back, I was like, Jerry taught us this, and I touched base, and I said, I'm going to try this. So I took that model paragraph, I recorded my voice, talking through my thinking process, and the students were able to access that while they were working on the paper. And I will tell you, I asked them afterwards what was most helpful, and 50% of them said that. That helped them understand how to write this complex type of a paragraph. So I would say in terms of money saving, certainly it's given us the opportunity to access things we wouldn't necessarily be able to access, but in my mind, that's just supporting instruction in the classroom.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things. You mentioned co-teaching or time with special educators. Do you have a time in your schedule for that type of collaboration?
We do. This year we went, it was this year, correct? Last year. We went to an 8-period day. And so during the lunch period, number one, we have a block of time. So there's a sort of a period where you eat your lunch and you also have this block of time to collaborate. which is great because we were just collaborating anyway. So now we have longer time to collaborate, and it's fantastic. So the co-teachers are often have a shared lunch. Also, Tom Mueller in scheduling worked very hard to make sure that there was a common planning time for the co-teachers as well. And I will say that that 8-period day and that time for collaboration is also cost nothing, but had very high impact for instruction.
So are you meeting with just the special education teachers or your department?
So the department, so within the department,